Any other comments on this? Okay, let me complete the thought. So on one side, it is our responsibility to be the ones who will make peace, and we will de-escalate. We will stop the cycle of destruction and the cycle of abuse. The second thing that I think is at least as important, Jesus keeps talking about what's important in the heart. I think it's really important that we keep a soft heart. You know, somebody hurts you. How do you respond? Do you harden your heart towards that person and you're ready to hurt them back? Or do you keep your heart open and, obviously vulnerable? If your heart is open to somebody, it can be hurt. But if somebody strikes you on one cheek, some people would think you're stronger. Your strength is defined by if you can hit the other person back harder than they hit you. Jesus seems to teach, and it seems to be a principle throughout the scripture, you're actually stronger if you have the capacity to not hit back. Or putting it a different way, I can punch pretty hard. I know that there are people who can punch harder than I can, but I went into training and learned how to hit. And I know that there are situations where if somebody struck me, I'd be able to hit them back a lot harder than they hit me. But that is not where maturity is defined. Maturity it's spiritual maturity. Maturity in Christ means I could probably do more damage to you than you did to me, but I'm not going to, because that isn't what God has called me to do. He calls us to love one another. What is the first law? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. On these two hang all of the law and the prophets. In other words, the only way for us to establish a truly just society is for all of us to work together to de-escalate the cycles of violence that tend to destroy communities. And God, I wish, yeah, go ahead.
Based on what you're saying, it is very difficult to, to love the person when the person is constantly being abusive and at it continuously.
Yeah.
And it is very difficult to forgive the person when the person is constantly at it and for no fault of yours. And when you know the person is doing it because by nature, the person is mean. So it is very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, Carol, what you're saying is definitely true. I feel that there are situations where we have to make a choice between preventing ourselves from being destroyed, and we are human beings made in the image of God.
Yeah.
And so we actually have a responsibility to ourselves and our own survival. I'm not just talking about our instinct for survival, but for our own well-being. In other words, if you're in that kind of an abusive relationship.
No, to be honest, I had a father who was like that. It was very, very difficult. So he was abusive to us children as well as to my mother. So it was very difficult for us, though, over time, I try to, get over my, I tried to forgive, kept trying to forgive and kept trying to get over my, not hate. I did not hate him because there was a good side to him too. And I tried to see where he was coming from, because he had a bad childhood. So I tried to see from where he was coming from. But it is very difficult to be objective, because he wasn't, for no reason he would be abusive and always listen to other people and come and the person, there is a split personality when you can be nice to others, but you're not being nice to your own people, your own family. It is not easy to forgive and to love.
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to say.
No, what you're saying is true. What I'm saying is, I think there's actually, going back to the subject of divorce, it's usually women, should a woman stay in an abusive situation where she's being beaten on a regular basis, and the children also, if there are children in that relationship, or as a result of it, are they at risk? And, people debate about this. Some people say divorce is never appropriate. But I think that the person took an oath to love and to honor and to cherish. I wrote the vows for Vinny and me when we were married. And quite stupidly, I vowed to love her as Christ loves the church. And I think I've never lived up to that vow. But if you have somebody who is vowed to love, honor, and cherish until death do us part, then they have broken the covenant when they are abusive. And I feel that nobody should feel obligated to continue in that kind of a relationship. By the way, I'm not trying to second guess the decisions that your mom has made in the past, just to be really clear about that. I'm saying the restrictions about divorce and these teachings concerning the eye for an eye. And actually, I think that we're now discussing what somebody put up on the WhatsApp group, the next few verses. You've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be the sons of your Father in heaven. He causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward do you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? If you greet only your brothers, what are you doing more than others? Do not even the pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. It's an impossible exhortation for us to have that kind of love.
Yeah.
Any other comments on this?
Again, about the evil. So we use evil in a different sense to say that, okay, there's good and there's evil. And here, do not resist an evil person. So in this context, I read it as someone who's not a good person. So what I'm coming to is, there are some people who are evil. And I tend to think that I have to keep away from evil. And I don't know if it's self-righteousness, but I look at the goodness of being good and that of being evil, which is the other extreme, which is the other end of the pole. So in that sense, I don't know, I just can't, talk to someone who's evil. I would rather shake the dust off myself and just walk away.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Sajjan. That's what I was actually trying to say earlier, and I think I didn't put it in words properly. in order for us to be good, godly people, I think that there's some people we just have to stay away from. And so I don't think the Bible is saying you have to stay in a really negative, destructive relationship and allow yourself to be unproductive and unfruitful because of that relationship. There are some people who are just destructive to everybody around them, and if it's possible to stay away from them, it's probably better to do so. So yeah, I agree with you. I'm not sure I have being honest, I think what I'm saying is biblical, but I'm not certain that it is. What Jesus is saying here is obviously radical, and it's a spiritual response to a fleshly situation where somebody else is behaving in a way that's evil, and you refuse to perpetuate it and expand it by adding your own evil to the evil they have already done. So yeah, I feel part of the idea of loving our enemy. Again, somebody asked on the group, is it possible? And I think that the short answer to the question is no, it isn't. Apart from the work of God's grace and His Spirit functioning within us, I think that by our own nature, no, this is not possible to live this way. Yet Jesus tells us to be like His Father is. Any other comments on this?
You said de-escalate. So I was in a retreat 2 weeks back, a committee retreat, and the speaker used the acronym TT, which is the T for thermometer, to measure the temperature, and to be the thermostat to cut off. So I think that's stuck in my mind here.
Nice. Nice. All right. Any other comments on this? This is really, really, I mean, think about it. We are to be children of our Father in heaven. He causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. So it seems like, as much as it has to do with us, the flow of goodness should always go from us towards other people. That is independent of what comes towards us. I'll just say it again. It seems like what Jesus is teaching is the flow of good, of grace, of mercy, of forgiveness, of love. That flow should always go out from us to others. And that principle is independent of what comes to us from others. So, I can tell you from my experience, anytime I think that I'm being good or generous or magnanimous, man, God does not allow us to outgive Him. Anything, any tiny little bit of thing, blessing that I give to another person out of love for God or give to God, He gives back in abundance. This principle of serendipity, that what goes around comes around. If you cast your when you cast your bread on the waters, it's going to come back to you, because it would be kind of soggy. But the principle, the idea is that what good things you send out will come back to you. I think that's the principle of what Jesus is teaching. Carol, are you going to say something?
No, it's very true what you said.
It's also true what you said. It is really, really difficult, especially if you're dealing with somebody who's just mean. And some people are honestly just fundamentally imbalanced. And how do you respond when that imbalance, the destructive aspect of their nature, is directed towards you? It's not an easy thing to deal with. Sajjan, were you going to add something?
Actually, I was very silent, but it was in my mind. I don't know how I picked it up. So, when we were young, it was so spontaneous to hit back, and we felt nice about it. But as we grow older, I think we have much more restraint. So, is it with age? Is it because we're growing more and more mature? Or
hopefully we improve with age. Yeah. But I feel like this is a principle that it seems like worldwide we are not passing this principle on to our children. And the world is definitely not better for it. And, you watch films, whether it's Bollywood or Hollywood or whatever other source for the film, so many films glorify the violent, the gunda who goes in and cleans house, the Bible says, don't envy a violent man. And again, the Proverbs in my daily reading as a family, we're going through the Proverbs right now. Over and over, the Proverbs say, it is a man's glory not to emphasize a fault, to, a fool says whatever's in his mind comes out of his mouth, but a wise person will show restraint. A fool will stir up strife, but a wise person will calm things. I don't have those Psalms or Proverbs memorized, obviously, but that principle is repeated over and over in the Proverbs. I think that part of maturity is learning to be less prone to just respond to violence or harshness or meanness with violence, harshness, and meanness. And yeah, I think it is partly maturity, but I think that we have to think of it as being better. And that requires maturity and growth. So this word, it's interesting, you're using the word maturity. The word here, perfect, can be translated mature. Mature or complete. It's the word telos. So when Jesus said tetelestai is his last thing on the cross, it actually means, it's translated, it is finished. But it's the same word. He could have actually said, that was perfect. And then he passed away, he died. He went to be with the Father. Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Jesus also on the cross was demonstrating spiritual, emotional perfection.
Does the Bible say anything about being born, a person being born evil, or is it the circumstances that make him evil? So, it's a very complex, sort of evil is very complex. So is it because, or is there something like being born evil? Or is that everybody is born good as a child, and then the circumstances make him evil?
Yeah.
Carol was saying that her father had a bad childhood. So that could be the reason why he had this probably a feeling of insufficiency himself. Probably doesn't appreciate himself. So that way, that's of course a question that people have asked. I think everywhere people ask this question, whether it's genetically born evil or something that's passed down from your parents, or is it the circumstances that make you evil?
Yeah.
It can, if it's the circumstances, it does mitigate to a certain extent that, okay, this guy is evil because of.
Yeah. Obviously this is a philosophical question. The way you've worded it is the frame by which this question has often been asked. Are we born, are we kind of genetically determined to be a particular way? Or are we born as a tabula rasa, a clean slate? And what happens to us and the choices that we make work together in order to make us either good or evil people. Mary Shelley was actually, when she was like 17, 18 years old, was trying to address that issue because there were people that came over to the house and they were asking the question, are we born a clean slate, or are we born with certain proclivities that make us good or evil? And she wrote a book about a scientist that put together a bunch of body parts and turned on an electrical switch and brought it to life. And she was actually arguing that the monster that Dr. Frankenstein created was innocent, that it was because everybody rejected him and shied away from him because he was hideous. Even Frankenstein felt that he had created a monster rather than a beautiful being. What Mary Shelley was arguing was that it was society that was unable to see this monstrous creature as the innocent, intelligent, good creature that it actually was. And because of the way they treated the creature, he became a monster. So she was arguing that society actually made the Frankenstein creature into a monster. Is everybody following what I'm saying? So, back to the question. I haven't forgotten that that's what we're talking about. What does the Bible say? The Bible actually says both. It's like so many questions. We pose the question as an either or, when the answer is quite often both and. In other words, from the book of Genesis, we're taught that God made humanity in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And he blessed them and told them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, and placed them in a perfect garden. But then they fell. So we have within us this tremendous capacity to be like the creator of the universe. He's actually designed us with that image within us. We also have tremendous destructive capacity to be like the enemy of our souls, like Satan, like a demon. And we are born with these capacities, not fully developed, but the capacities are entirely there in every human being that is born. And I think that's part of the reason Jesus had to be born of a virgin, because God was basically starting over. He was born without that fall. So he was a human being made in God's image that had not been tainted by the wrong choices that Adam and Eve made, and all of humanity since. So the Bible seems to be teaching, yes, we have tremendous capacity for good. Every one of us who is born, we have tremendous capacity for evil. We are born into a world that will, in some cases, hate us and abuse us, and all of us in some way or other have been hurt by other human beings. The thing is that not every human being chooses to allow the hurt that has been done to us to be perpetuated through us and then actually expanded. Some of us seem to expand the evil within us exponentially, and others seem to expand the good within them exponentially. So the Bible teaches both genetic predisposition towards good and evil, and this societal thing that Mary Shelley is describing, that can turn any one of us towards that evil nature, and the fundamental importance of us being a people of moral agency, where we choose how we are going to respond and who we are going to become based on what we have as the ideal of the kind of people that we want to be. And God will actually hold us accountable for those choices that we make. I don't know, does that seem like an incomplete answer?
No, can I say?
Please. Yeah.
So according to what you said, so going back to my father, so my father also, it was a choice about being good and bad. So the choice of being good was towards my sister, only towards my sister. So she was like his princess or whatever. So he was only good towards her. So to the rest of us, the bad side was shown most of the time. And it was not like he was bad all the time, but most of the time, 90% of the time, I would say. But towards her, it was 100% of the time. So to answer to Roy,
Yeah. There's always a talk about
nature
and nurture.
Yeah.
Nature and nurture. So that's what psychologists say.
And it's also about choice, I guess.
Yeah. So, Carol, you're speaking of your own examples. So you've had choices over the years to either kind of reflect that meanness in your own character or to choose to be kind and loving and gracious.
Yeah.
And I think that you've chosen in general the kind and the gracious and the loving over the meanness. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel that some of the most gracious and good people I know were raised in abusive circumstances. I'm not saying it's a good thing they were raised in those circumstances. I'm saying every generation, we have a choice to make. And we need to train our families. And if we have that in our past, we need to be sure that the next generation has a different experience than we had. To break these cycles.
Can I just like to share about a book that is useful in this particular context? Scott Peck, who wrote The Roadless Travel. That's a hugely popular book. Sold at that time, I'm talking 20 or 30 years ago, 6 million or 10 million, New York bestseller list. He subsequently wrote another book. I don't know if it is immediately or later. One of his other books is called People of the Lie, in which in his foreword, he writes, I just gave away the book just a couple of months ago to somebody who's struggling with this, and it helped her hugely. She's not from India. She was almost healed with that. And in this foreword, Scott Peck writes, I have been accused of having a Christian bias in my previous book, which is There's a Roadless Travel. Let me assure you here, paragraph, that I have no such bias. The only reason I exist is because I am a Christian, signified by my non-denominational baptism at the age of 43. And that he writes in this foreword, of this book, People of the Lie, of how parents can be evil, with case study. He's one of America's US top psychiatrists. Beautiful book, difficult to process, but it has helped people. It's Scott Peck, People of the Lie.
Well, I know we only, it has taken us, this is, I think this is third session in chapter 5. I think we will not keep the pace of the Sermon on the Mount throughout the Gospel of Matthew. And I think I already warned you that it will take us some time to get through the Sermon on the Mount. And then our study of the Gospel of Matthew should accelerate quite a bit. But it's probably better for us to end there rather than jumping into chapter 6, because there's so much in chapter 6. So I'll encourage you all to read the notes and Any other comments on this before I turn off the recording?